It was August 1943, and the warm, early morning light spilled over the French coastline. From the cliffs above Dieppe, careful German spotters scanned the horizon, the binoculars catching the faint outlines of an approaching fleet. The signs were unmistakable. A large-scale Allied raid was underway. Within seconds, the Luftwaffe pilots scrambled into their cockpits, engines roaring to life as orders came through. Intercept and destroy as many bombers as they could before they reached the coastal defenses. As the two forces closed in, the British-made fighters met the Messerschmitts head-on, a clash like many the Luftwaffe had fought before. However, inside those cockpits, the pilots spoke in accents quite different from those typically heard aboard a Spitfire. These men had crossed an entire ocean for a chance to join the fight. As the legendary battle over Dieppe unfolded, their true identity remained a closely guarded secret. Time to act. By September 1939, Hitler's invasion of Poland plunged Europe into outright chaos. Within months, Germany crushed France and ravaged Allied shipping, leaving Britain to endure a brutal summertime battle by themselves, emerging victorious but heavily battered. Knowing reinforcements were desperately needed, Prime Minister Winston Churchill turned to the United States for help. There was, however, one major problem. At the time, the United States had strict neutrality laws prohibiting the sale of war materials, providing training, or otherwise aiding nations at war. Though the 1939 Cash and Carry Act allowed some leeway, such as the sales of goods, as long as they were paid for up front and transported by non-American ships, any direct involvement in the war remained strictly banned. Volunteers who defied these restrictions risked losing their citizenship. Though public opinion in the American homeland remained deeply divided, there was quiet encouragement for initiatives that could aid Britain without overtly violating the law. Soon, the Roosevelt administration found ways to navigate these constraints. One of those initiatives began when Charles Sweeney, a wealthy American living in London who had had enough of watching Europe spiral into conflict, drew inspiration from the Lafayette Escadrille, a World War I-era unit of American volunteer pilots flying for France who flew their fragile biplanes over Europe into daring face-to-face combat against the greatest of German aces, earning them victories and international fame. From then on, with support from his social circle, the expatriate began recruiting American volunteers and convincing the British government to establish a dedicated unit within the Royal Air Force. The man's efforts coincided with those of his uncle, also named Charles Sweeney, a seasoned mercenary who had already been raising funds to assemble trained pilots to fight in Europe. While the elder Sweeney's focus was initially on supporting Finland against Soviet forces, following the German invasion of France, his mission shifted toward aiding Britain. In July 1940, after months of lobbying, the British Air Ministry approved the formation of an American squadron within the Royal Air Force, finally acknowledging the growing number of volunteers. To reflect their origins, the squadron adopted the eagle, the American national bird, as its name and insignia. The first Eagle Squadron, number 71, was established that September, and as more recruits arrived, two additional squadrons, 121 and 133, were formed over the following year. Through it all, the younger Sweeney coordinated closely with these efforts, using more than $100,000 of privately raised funds to cover travel expenses, administrative costs, and other logistical hurdles. Now, the Eagle Squadrons were finally ready to begin their training. The road to joining the Eagle Squadrons was not for the faint-hearted. Volunteers needed a high school diploma, be aged between 20 and 31, and have excellent eyesight. Most importantly, they had to log at least 300 hours of certified flight time. These requirements, though rigorous, were less demanding than those of the United States Army Air Corps, and soon, more and more attracted recruits eager to fly who might not have qualified for service back home rushed to enlist. The Eagle's training needed to be fast and effective. As with France crumbling in front of the world, Britain stood alone, and every pilot needed to be ready as quickly as possible. Following basic flight training, the new recruits faced a whirlwind of training designed to transform them from capable aviators into combat-ready fighters. Their Royal Air Force journey began with advanced operational training at specialized units known as operational training units. For 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes more, pilots were immersed in a crash course on several aircraft types, like the Miles Master Trainer, Hawker Hurricane, and the Supermarine Spitfire. The latter two, already iconic in Britain's fight against the Luftwaffe, demanded precision and adaptability, qualities that were drilled into the recruits through endless drills, simulated dogfights, and formation flying from the moment the sun rose until it set. The pilots of the Eagle squadrons were highly motivated. According to Ira Eaker, famed Air Force commander, quote, "They realized they should do their gallant best to see that Great Britain survived." After completing their training, every pilot knew their next destination would be the front lines. Number 71 Squadron. By February 1941, the 1st Eagle Squadron, number 71, was finally operational. Stationed at RAF Church Fenton, they began defensive patrols. Though the skies were often quiet, after moving closer to the European front, the men knew the calm would not last long. The American-flown unit's first major blow came that May, when Mike Kolandorsky, an eager and skilled pilot, was tragically lost in a fighter sweep over the Netherlands. Despite the sting, the squadron pressed on, as their operations were sure to intensify when command transferred them right into the heart of No. 11 Group's territory, where daily battles with the Luftwaffe tested Britain's finest pilots. On June 21st, a patrol over the English Channel turned disastrous for 22-year-old Nathaniel Morans, whose Hurricane was outmaneuvered by a Messerschmitt Bf-109, forcing him to bail out over the water. After swimming for nearly 2 hours, the desolate man was picked up by a German patrol boat, tragically making him the first American prisoner of war. Exactly a month later, on July 21st, while escorting bombers near Lille, Pilot Officer William R. Dunn caught sight of a Bf-109F weaving through the formation and aiming straight for the bombers. Without hesitation, Dunn pushed his Hurricane to its limit to close the gap. Lining up his sights, he sent a massive burst of gunfire toward the German fighter, causing it to disintegrate and spiral downward in a fiery trail. The radio buzzed with cheers as the Eagle Squadron marked their first confirmed victory. After so many setbacks, Dunn's incredible win swept through the squadron like a breath of fresh air. The Americans had left their mark in the skies over Europe for the first time. Dunn would later become the first American ace of World War II in Europe. By August, as the squadron transitioned to the iconic Spitfire Mark V, a sleek and powerful machine that matched even the Luftwaffe's finest, the Eagles made their presence felt, engaging in fierce fighter sweeps over the continent, and their tally began to rise. As the year drew to a close, the Eagles returned to base for a brief rest, knowing their mission was far from over. All this time, for the Germans, these were just British pilots, and they remained clueless that among these Spitfires and Hurricanes were proud Americans, fighting long before their country declared war. Fighting amplifies. The 2nd Eagle Squadron, number 121, was equipped with Hurricanes and tasked with coastal convoy escort duties. Their first major success came on September 15, 1941, when they claimed a German aircraft, bringing it down in flames. By November, the energized pilots, who were now also armed with Spitfire Mark V's, were stepping right into the thick of operations over the English Channel. As their missions grew more frequent with the new year, the men performed anything from bomber escorts to fighter sweeps over occupied Europe. Meanwhile, in early 1942, the 3rd and final Eagle Squadron, number 133, joined the famed Biggin Hill Wing in May, a prestigious assignment that placed them at the forefront of RAF operations. On July 31, 1942, during a bomber escort mission to Abbeville, the squadron encountered a seasoned and feared Luftwaffe ace, Rudolf Flans, with 52 confirmed victories. In the battle that followed, the American-flown Spitfires engaged the Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, where Pilot Officer Jesse Taylor incredibly claimed 2 enemy aircraft, while Pilot Officer W. Baker downed another. In the chaos, Pilot Flans himself was shot down. By the time the smoke cleared, number 133 Squadron had claimed 3 enemy fighters destroyed and 1 probable, though they paid a steep price with 3 of their own aircraft lost. On September 26, 1942, disaster struck the Eagle Squadron once more during a mission over Morlaix while escorting US B-17 Flying Fortresses. Flying brand new Spitfire Mark 9s, They were all caught in heavy cloud cover and strong winds that carried them further south than expected. Now, low on fuel and unaware of their position, they descended directly over the heavily fortified city of Brest. As powerful anti-aircraft fire erupted around them, the enemy fighters lost no time and pounced right into them. In a matter of minutes, 6 pilots were shot down and taken prisoner. 4 were lost, and only 2 managed to escape. 1 luckily crash-landing in England, and another evading capture entirely. Among those taken prisoner was Flight Lieutenant Gordon Britell, who would later become part of the legendary Great Escape from Stalag Luft 3. Threefold at Dieppe. On the morning of August 19, 1942, the skies over Dieppe roared to life as the largest Allied raid of the war up to that point unfolded. All 3 Eagle squadrons flew together in a coordinated operation in this legendary battle. The American pilots were tasked with providing critical air support for the amphibious assault on the heavily fortified French coast. The operation began as waves of Allied troops stormed the beaches below, and the Eagles soared into the skies above, all bracing for the expected resistance. Back in their occupied bases, aware of the operation's scale, launched a powerful counteroffensive, making direct contact with No. 71 Squadron, where they came face-to-face with a large formation of Ju-88 bombers over the channel. Ready to respond, the Eagles quickly shredded one of the enemy aircraft under a hail of gunfire. Farther south, No. 121 encountered a squadron of FW-190s. The Spitfires dove through gunfire and tracer rounds, and upon spotting a single FW-190 breaking from its formation to pursue a group of Allied bombers, an Eagle pilot cut it off just in time, sending it tumbling into the waves. The fiercest fighting came for No. 133 Squadron, right in the heart of Dieppe, where they faced overwhelming numbers. As their Spitfires tangled with FW-190s and Ju-88 bombers, Pilot Officer Jesse Taylor led the charge, taking down a Bf-109F and an FW-190 in rapid succession. Despite the odds stacking against them minute after minute, the squadron pressed forward, claiming 4 more FW-190s, 1 Ju-88, and a Dornier Do-217, while covering the troops below with unwavering determination. By the end of the infamous Dieppe raid, the squadrons had claimed an impressive tally: 71st Squadron down to Ju-88, 121 Squadron an FW-190, and 133 Squadron added 6 more enemy planes to their score. But the day came at a cost, as 6 Eagle Spitfires were lost in the fight. Yet, even as the squadron members celebrated their victories back at base, there was another thing on their minds. The end of the Eagles. When news of the attack on Pearl Harbor reached the Eagle squadrons in December 1941, the writing was on the wall. With the United States now fully at war, the days of flying under the British flag were numbered. While a handful of pilots opted to stay with the RAF, most saw the transition as an exciting opportunity to fight for their country. For many, the promise of American-style food and significantly better pay only sweetened the deal. On September 29, 1942, this change finally became official during a formal and, for some, tear-jerking ceremony at Debden, where high-ranking officers from both sides gathered to mark the moment. In a powerful speech, Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas stated, quote, "We of Fighter Command deeply regret this parting, for in the course of the past 18 months, we have seen the stuff of which you are made, and we could not ask for better companions with whom to see this fight through to a finish. It is with deep personal regret that I today say goodbye to you, whom it has been my privilege to command. You joined us readily and of your own free will when our need was greatest." With the transfer, the squadrons were reorganized into the U.S. Army Air Force's 4th Fighter Group. No. 71 Squadron became the 334th Fighter Squadron. No. 121 became the 335th, and No. 133 became the 336th. To ensure the transition was seamless, and to allow the pilots to maintain their edge in combat, the men were allowed to continue flying their beloved Spitfires, repainted with American insignia and roundel. The Eagle squadrons arrived during a critical period for Britain, as the RAF moved from a defensive strategy to take the fight directly to German forces. The unit's efforts also strengthened the partnership between Britain and the United States. However, rather than an ending, for the men from the Eagle Squadron, as the United States took its place on the global stage in the fight against the Axis, their mission was just beginning.